My mom faked cancer to control me. From my earliest memory, it was always me and mom against the world. My dad left before I could walk, so our stories never began with parents, only parent. Mom Caroline liked to say she'd rescued both of us from disappointment. She worked 2 jobs, laughed too loudly, called me her miracle. When people pitied the single mother doing it all, she'd smile and say, "We're stronger as a duo," and she meant it. She was my compass, every decision filtered through her. What I wore, who I saw, how late I stayed out. When I got an A on a test, she posted pictures of my report card. When I made a new friend, she'd invite the girl over for dinner and study her like a specimen. I told myself it was love because it was just the kind that hurt a little. She wasn't cruel, she was magnetic. Everyone adored her quick wit, the way she could turn tragedy into a punchline. At home, she'd dance around the kitchen, singing old songs off key, flour dusting her hair. I'd laugh until my stomach ached. And then, like weather turning, she'd grow quiet. "Promise you'll never leave me," she'd whisper. Every time I said I promise, a knot tightened somewhere deep. When I mentioned joining a club or hanging out after school, her eyes would glisten. She had that weaponized sadness down to an art. "You're all I have, Sophie," she'd say softly. Simple words, heavy chains. It felt selfish to want space when she'd given up so much for me, so I stayed close, let her world swallow mine. Back then, I called it devotion. Now I know devotion and dependence can wear the same face. Still, when outsiders commented on how lucky I was to have such a supportive mother, I nodded, agreeing out loud even as something uneasy stirred underneath. Because sometimes her protection felt a lot like possession, and sometimes her love sounded less like a lullaby and more like a warning. But I didn't question her. How could I? She was my best friend, my safe place, my only place. And if there were cracks forming in that perfect bond, I had trained myself not to see them. I still remember that afternoon in perfect fragments, the smell of rain on pavement, the squeak of my backpack zipper as I dropped it by the door, the silence that felt wrong. Mom sat at the kitchen table surrounded by scattered papers, tissue clutched in her fist. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged into half moons. For a split second, I thought someone had died. In a way, someone had. She looked up slowly. "Sophie, sit down," she whispered, voice cracking on my name. I obeyed, knees shaking. The papers were hospital forms, all stamped with medical logos I didn't understand. One word leapt out, *oncology. My throat closed. "I went for a checkup," she said, clutching the chair's edge. "They found something, stage 3, it's cancer." The room tilted. I reached for her hands, stammering, No, that can't, there must be a mistake." She cried harder, saying she didn't want to scare me, that she'd fight, that maybe God was testing us. Between sobs, she kept apologizing for ruining my future, for being a burden. I promised 100 things in those 5 minutes, that I'd cook, clean, work extra hours, whatever she needed. And she smiled through tears, murmuring I was her angel, her reason to keep living. That smile branded itself into me. It made the impossible feel necessary. The days blurred after that. I started skipping hangouts, then skip homework, then practically skipped sleep. There were meds to organize, bills to decipher, and a small mountain of unopened envelopes I pretended we could handle alone. I found a weekend job at the grocery store, telling teachers I just needed experience. My grades slipped quietly out of excellence into mediocrity, and for the first time she didn't care as long as I was home. Sometimes she'd wake up in pain, clutching her side, and I'd hold her until she calmed. Then almost tenderly she'd whisper, "Don't ever forget how much I need you." It sounded like affection, but underneath was something desperate. When relatives visited, she laughed weakly, brushing off questions. "My girl's the best nurse there is." They'd pat my shoulder, proud of my maturity. I tried to smile back, hiding how scared I was. Because as devoted as I felt, dread never left the edges of my thoughts. Everything about her illness felt cinematic, too clean, too rehearsed. But guilt smothered suspicion before it could speak. If she was dying, how could I doubt her? So I didn't. I just worked, prayed, and shrank myself smaller, believing that love meant sacrifice, even if that sacrifice consumed me whole. The first few months after the diagnosis were a blur of obligation, work, school, caretaking on repeat. Mom's treatments seemed to multiply overnight. Infusions on Thursdays, blood work on Mondays, experimental therapy every other weekend. But I was never invited to come along. "Hospitals make you faint," she'd tease gently, patting my cheek. "You don't need to see all that." Hair started clogging the shower drain. I woke up one morning to find tufts scattered across the sink, her razor resting nearby. "It was falling out anyway," she said matter-of-factly, tying a silk scarf around her head. "Might as well own the look." Everyone at the pharmacy told her she looked brave. I told her she looked beautiful. Both of us were acting. One evening, I asked if I could meet her oncologist to understand what stage 3 meant, to help plan ahead. Her smile faltered for half a second before returning to full brightness. "Honey, they don't allow family at every session. There's paperwork, privacy stuff. Don't stress, I'm handling it." She kissed my forehead. "I need you to stay normal." So I tried. I missed my junior prom, skipped birthdays, traded study sessions for late-night cleaning. When friends texted asking why I vanished, I sent them cancer ribbon emojis and promises to hang out soon. Soon kept moving farther away. The more I put into her recovery, the more the walls of her world enclosed mine. She started calling me from work, asking where I was, who I was with. "I just worry something could happen," she said, voice trembling faintly. "If I die, you'll be alone. You have to stay close now." And every word wrapped tighter around my chest. Then an unexpected crack. At school during lunch, I overheard 2 classmates whispering, "Her mom's not even listed at the oncology office. My aunt works there." "Seriously? Then who's she visiting every week?" The fries on my tray went cold. I walked out of the cafeteria before anyone saw the panic rising in my throat. They had to be wrong, just gossip. Still, that night when I asked Mom for the doctor's name, she bristled instantly. "Why are are you cross-examining me?" she snapped, slamming a drawer. "After everything I've done, you still think I'm lying?" Her eyes brimmed the perfect proportion of hurt and rage. "If my own daughter doesn't believe I'm sick, maybe I don't deserve to fight." The guilt hit like a bat to the ribs. I hugged her, crying apologies, convinced I was selfish, cruel even for doubting. She clung to me and whispered, "Never leave me, Sophie. We beat this together or not at all." That night I lay awake listening to her breathing in the next room, wondering why the sound of it made me feel trapped instead of reassured. Somewhere inside, a quiet awareness started stirring, a voice saying maybe this wasn't about sickness, maybe it was about control. But I smothered it like always, afraid the truth might demand I stop loving her. I began noticing things only people who have run out of denial notice, the details that shouldn't add up but somehow already did. The first was the email. I'd walked into her room holding her laundry when the computer chimed. She lunged for the mouse so fast it startled me. The screen went black before I could glimpse more than a few letters, something about appointment confirmation. After that, she kept the laptop locked. The next clue arrived wrapped in a hospital brand paper bag. While cleaning, I spotted the medicine bottles she always kept beside her bed. Their labels were blank, just plain white stickers. When I asked what they were, she said, "Supplements my doctor mixes just for me." I wanted to believe her, but the handwriting on the side was hers. Once the phone rang while she was in the shower. The ID read Dr. Patel Oncology. I hesitated, then answered quietly. A woman's voice said, "Department office. May I speak to Caroline Miller?" "Oh, she's busy right now," I replied quickly. "Who's calling?" she asked. "I'm her daughter's." Silence. "Then we don't have any scheduled patient by that name." The receiver clattered against the sink, my hand cold for hours after. I tried convincing myself it was a different clinic, a data mix-up, anything that didn't mean what it obviously meant. But the next day, she deleted her call log before I even reached the phone. By then, suspicion had stopped whispering and started screaming. I began sneaking around like a criminal in my own home, checking drawers, opening unpaid bills, photographing them on my phone. Most envelopes were credit card offers and donation thank you notes from cancer charities addressed to her name. Donations she'd never made. I took the bus downtown one Saturday under the excuse of work and visited the city hospital myself. An elderly clerk at the oncology desk tapped her keyboard, frowned, and shook her head. "Sorry, honey, no record of that patient." The walk home felt endless. I wanted to cry, to vomit, to find some other reality where this wasn't happening. This was my mother, my hero, the woman who raised me alone. She couldn't be lying, not about this, but every piece of paper in my hand said she was. That night I found the final proof. The insurance company statement sitting half hidden under the mail pile. No treatment codes, no hospital charges, just regular premiums. I sat on the kitchen floor clutching that envelope, too afraid to stand. A part of me still searched for mercy in the details. Maybe she'd misfiled documents. Maybe there was another Caroline Miller. But even as I invent excuses, I know, my fingers tremble not from fear of her sickness, but from the realization there might never have been any sickness at all. And if her illness was a lie, then what did that make our whole life together? I confronted her on a Thursday night, the kind of evening that looks harmless, takeout containers on the counter, the TV humming low. My hands shook so badly the soda spilled over the rim of my glass. She noticed immediately. "Sophie, what's wrong?" I set the insurance papers on the table. "I called the hospital," I said, voice paper thin. "They don't have any record of you, none of the treatments, none of the doctors." Her eyes blinked once, twice, like a camera adjusting focus. Then she laughed, soft and false. "Sweetheart, you must have called the wrong location." "I didn't," I said, "and I found your prescriptions. They're just vitamins you relabeled." "Why, Mom?" The laughter cracked. She sank into a chair, the mask barely slipping. For a second, I thought she might confess gently, tell me it was a misunderstanding. But her chin lifted, defensive. "I was only trying to protect you from details you couldn't handle. You don't know what stress does to patients." "Patients?" I snapped. "There is no patient, there's no cancer." She froze. The silence after that sentence felt dangerous, a vacuum sucking every bit of air from the room. Then quietly she started to cry. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Then make me understand," I said. I was trembling, but louder now. "Please." The tears changed shape, self-pity disguised as grief. "You were slipping away," she said through sobs. "Ever since you met those new friends, ever since you started talking about college. You barely looked at me anymore. I thought if you knew I was sick, you'd stay. We were supposed to be us just like always." Every word landed heavier than the last. "So you made me your nurse." She reached for my hand. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. At first it was little things, telling you I felt tired, dizzy. But then you seemed so kind, so alive when you were taking care of me. You smiled again. I felt important." I pulled away, horrified. "You trapped me, Moms. You made me feel guilty for having a life. You made me your prisoner." Her face twisted, anger sparking through the tears. "I did everything for you. You act like I'm a monster for wanting love." "I never asked you to give me your whole life," I shouted. "You took mine instead." The argument devolved into silence, broken breathing, storm outside beginning to rumble. She stood finally, wiping her cheeks. "If you leave, I won't survive this time," she said softly like a curse. I stared at her, realizing that threat was the truest sentence she'd spoken all night. She didn't want survival, she wanted control. I packed the essentials while she sat on the couch, hollow and shaking. Each zipper's sound felt final. As I stepped toward the door, thunder rolled, sharp and cold. She followed me onto the porch, voice hoarse. "Sophie, please don't do this. I'm sorry, I'll get help. Just don't leave me. Everyone leaves me." Rain started to fall, washing her tears into the same rhythm. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to turn back, to hold her, to make it make sense. But there was was nothing left to fix. I said, I love you, but I can't love you like this, and walked away. The last time I saw her that night, she was on the porch, hands covering her face, sobbing under the thunder. And for the first time in my life, love didn't pull me backward, it pushed me forward. The first night away felt unreal. I slept on my best friend Maya's couch, surrounded by stray blankets and the hum of her family's refrigerator. Freedom didn't feel like joy, it felt like vertigo. Every time my phone lit up, I expected one of Mom's guilt-laced texts. At first there were dozens. Come home, I can't breathe without you. You've misunderstood everything. Then radio silence, which somehow hurt worse. I told Maya's parents the truth in fragments, careful not to sound cruel. They nodded awkwardly, saying, you did the right thing, sweetheart. But right and wrong meant nothing to me then. I'd been raised to equate love with sacrifice. Without anyone to serve, I didn't know how to exist. Mornings were hardest. I'd reach for my phone automatically to check if she'd eaten, to send reminders for appointments that never existed. My hands shook from habit alone. I caught myself whispering, Mom, when the kettle whistled, expecting her laughter from the next room. The silence after was crushing. At school, people didn't say much. Rumors drifted, students speculating about the crazy mom thing. I forced myself to focus on college applications, but even typing essays about personal growth felt hypocritical. All I'd ever grown were roots in someone else's soil. Therapy was Maya's idea. The first session was excruciating. A sterile office, a woman with calm eyes asking, when did you realize your needs never came first? I couldn't answer. The truth was I didn't know what my needs were. Week after week, the therapist helped me see patterns I'd called love. How Mom fell sick whenever I wanted independence, how she made herself the center of every priority. We unpacked words like asterisk, gaslighting, and emotional dependency. They sounded academic, too clean for what I felt, but they fit. Every revelation came with grief. Sometimes I missed her so violently it felt physical, like a phantom limb. Missing her didn't mean I wanted to go back. It just meant I hadn't learned how to detach love from obligation. Slowly, I started to stitch together tiny fragments of a self, reading in silence without guilt, walking home without checking my phone, laughing without wondering if she'd hear. Each simple freedom felt both sacred and strange. Healing didn't come as gratitude toward her or anger either. It came as understanding that my mother's illness wasn't cancer, it was fear. And surviving her meant learning that compassion doesn't require captivity. It wasn't supposed to become public. I only told the school counselor because I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. She listened as I stammered through months of lies, fake treatments, forged letters, guilt as control. She nodded slowly, then said she had to report it. You deserve protection, Sophie, she insisted. I nodded, though in my gut it felt like betrayal dressed as honesty. Within days, the truth rippled through our small town. Someone leaked that Caroline Miller had faked cancer for financial help. Headlines followed, Mother deceives community. Comment sections became courts of opinion. People who'd once delivered casseroles crossed the street to avoid her. GoFundMe donors demanded refunds. The story wasn't just ours anymore, it belonged to everyone's outrage. At first, I thought vindication might feel cleansing. It didn't. Walking down Main Street, I kept my hoodie pulled low, half expecting strangers to hiss accusations. Some even did. One woman muttered, that's the daughter, like I carried contagion. I started answering unknown numbers with shaking hands, unsure if it would be press or mom. The voicemails began on the third night. Her tone changed with each one. The first, tearful apologies, asterisk, I didn't mean for it to explode like this. The next, sharp anger, asterisk, you've ruined my life just like your father. The last, haunting quiet, asterisk, if you'd loved me enough, we could have kept our secret. Every message reopened a wound. Maya begged me to block her number. My therapist agreed, but curiosity kept winning. I played each recording until her voice became a ghost haunting my earbuds. It was like reliving every manipulation on demand. The newspaper printed an editorial calling the scandal a tragedy of mental illness and misplaced devotion. I stared at that sentence for a long time. They weren't wrong, but they still didn't understand. This wasn't about one lie. It was about an entire relationship built on fear of abandonment. Guilt still followed me like a shadow. I told myself I hadn't destroyed her, she destroyed herself. But the small, broken daughter inside me still whispered, you exposed her. You finished her off. At night, I'd draft replies to her messages I never sent. I wish you chosen honesty over attention. Delete. I loved you even when you were lying. Delete. I'm sorry for surviving you. Delete. Eventually, I left the recordings unheard and the phone on silent. Letting her voice fade wasn't cruelty. It was CPR for my own. Self-preservation isn't betrayal, even when it feels like it. But learning that truth hurt worse than any accusation ever could. Months passed before I gathered the courage to see her again. Therapy helped me frame the meeting as closure, though part of me still called it surrender. I needed to look my ghost in the eye, not keep running from it. The house hadn't changed, same floral curtains, same faint scent of soap and lemon cleaner, but smaller somehow, like the walls themselves were ashamed. Mom opened the door after a long pause. She looked thinner, her hair uneven, eyes darting everywhere but my face. You came, she whispered, as if my presence was both a miracle and a threat. We stood in silence until I finally said, can we talk? She nodded and led me to the living room. The couch where I once fell asleep next to her during movie nights now felt like a crime scene wrapped in nostalgia. I started carefully, I know the truth now, I just need to understand why. She crossed her arms, defensive already. You think I haven't asked myself that every day? Her tone shifted between defiance and desperation. I never wanted to hurt you, Sophie. I was terrified you'd leave like everyone else. I thought if you needed me, if we depended on each other, you wouldn't disappear. Her confession should have felt redemptive, but instead it hollowed me out further. You didn't need need cancer to keep me close, I said quietly. You needed trust, and you destroyed that. She looked up, eyes glassy. I'm sick, Sophie, not with cancer but something else. I don't even know what's real anymore. I lost control. It was the first honest thing she'd ever told me. I wanted to scream that it wasn't enough, that apologies can't unmake trauma, but instead, tears surprised both of us. You made me believe loving you meant saving you, I cried, and when I couldn't, I thought I was the broken one. She reached out tentatively. For a heartbeat, I hesitated, then took her hand, just once, because forgiveness isn't about erasing, it's about releasing. I forgive you, I said, meaning it more for myself than for her, but I can't live like this anymore. Her thumb brushed my palm, trembling. So what happens to us now? We stop pretending we're each other's only lifeline. Outside, the late afternoon light spilled through the curtains, dull but warm. I stood, leaving her clutching a tissue, her shoulders shaking. At the door, I turned once more. She looked fragile, not the manipulative figure who'd ruled my life, but a frightened woman trapped by her own invention. Walking away didn't feel triumphant. It felt like unlocking a cage both of us had lived in too long. Healing didn't arrive with fireworks. It crept in quietly, disguised as routines. I'd wake in the mornings and for a few seconds forget my history. Then memory would settle, soft, bearable now. I breathed through it instead of fighting. That was progress. College gave me a clean slate, though ghosts packed themselves into my dorm with the rest of my boxes. Orientation week felt foreign. Everyone talked about curfews and strict parents while I bit my tongue. How could I explain that my mother's love had once been a leash? Therapy continued. My counselor called recovery the slow return of choice. Each week we practiced tiny freedoms, making decisions without permission, accepting kindness without repayment, saying asterisk no asterisk without apologizing. It sounds simple, but after years of conditioning, it felt revolutionary. There were setbacks. Some nights I scrolled through old texts, half expecting another wave of guilt. Sometimes I caught myself composing messages, asterisk are you eating well? Did you sleep asterisk, then deleting them before hitting send. My fingers remembered servitude better than my heart remembered peace. But my life started filling with steadier things. I joined a psychology club, drawn by an almost frantic curiosity about why people manipulate, why love curdles into control. Eventually, that curiosity hardened into direction. I declared psychology as my major. Maybe understanding it was my way of reclaiming power, turning chaos into purpose. Maya stayed my anchor. On bad days, she'd drive us to the coast where we'd sit on the hood of her car and watch waves collapse. Salt air, open sky, the opposite of every closed room I'd grown up in. Once she said, you know, freedom doesn't erase scars. I nodded. No, I told her, but it gives them somewhere to breathe. Mom and I talk occasional. Holidays, birthdays, short calls about mundane things, whether grocery brands, the cat. The conversations tiptoe around history. We speak through polite distance instead of venom now. She's in therapy too, though progress for her means something different. I don't ask for details. Boundaries are love with conditions, and I finally understand that. Sometimes, late at night, I reread the first essay I wrote for class. Love built on fear is a cage, but truth is the key that opens it. It's the line that still guides me when guilt flares back. I'll always carry her voice somewhere inside me, the worried tone, the guilt curled like smoke, but it no longer dictates my every breath. She taught me how dangerous love becomes when it confuses devotion with ownership. And she also taught me, unintentionally, how strong it can be when built on truth.